Joining me now is founder, CEO, and editor of the Ground Truth Project, Charles Sennott, along with president and co-founder of Report for America, Steve Waldman. Both were together on a panel earlier today about bringing investigative and accountability reporting to your community. So first of all, for people who are watching the live stream who don't know what either of these two organizations do, they're connected to each other. Let's explain one after the other. Ground Truth first.
Sure. So the Ground Truth Project supports a new generation of journalists to go out in the world and do this information. We've been at it for 7 years, but in the fall of 2017, we launched Report for America as a program dedicated to public service through local reporting. It really was taking an idea Steve's had for years about how to scale a notion of putting reporters into local newsrooms, getting them into undercovered areas, and really scaling a project. So Ground Truth is sort of the home of Report for America, and we're really proud to have it, and it's been exciting to get it underway.
Okay, and Report for America, you're focusing on what, and how do you place these reporters and where?
So, local. It's all about going to newsrooms in communities where they have news deserts. News deserts can be literally a geographic gap, some counties that no one's covering. It also can be an issue that no one is paying any attention to, or a community. So this program is sort of loosely modeled after like Peace Corps, Teach for America, AmeriCorps, in that we recruit talented, emerging journalists from all over the country. And then we have news organizations apply to us saying, we want one of those talented young reporters. And we place these young reporters into the newsrooms where they do a year or two full-time reporting on the staffs of those news organizations. And the key is that they're covering a gap, some important topic that is not being covered as a result of all the kind of economic devastation that's happened.
Now, is it free for newsrooms to have one of these fellows?
No, they have to have skin in the game. They have to put in half of the salary. So we put in half of a, say, entry-level salary. Report for America puts in half. Then the newsroom puts in half, but we work with them to raise some local money, local philanthropy. So it's ideally split 3 ways.
Okay, what have you learned now, 7 years out, that you didn't know about how Ground Truth would increase its relevance or reach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Ground Truth, we were doing a fellowship model, and we were doing national and global reporting, and really candidly, I guess, doing work we're really proud of, but we weren't moving the needle for the crisis in journalism. And I feel like one of the things I've really learned in working with Steve is that there's a need now to go all in. The crisis in journalism has become a crisis for our democracy. Report for America is an immediate response to getting reporters out in the field, tied together by this idea we've always had at Ground Truth, which is that the best reporting is on the ground. You can't parachute in. You have to be there. You have to live in the community. You have to breathe the story. And I think that's what I'm really excited about as this next phase of Ground Truth, to deploy really a corps, as we call it, like Peace Corps or Marine Corps. Put people into these local communities, because right now we're going to have to see bodies on the ground. We have to have people in these communities. We have communities that aren't getting covered. The only way to deal with that, we think, is an injection of more nonprofit support to go after real coverage that's not getting done otherwise. And really, truly, if you think about Knight Foundation, tremendous support it's given to this issue of local news, $300 million. We're really proud to be part of that, but it's really not enough. The nonprofit sector is going to have to keep doubling, tripling down because of the crisis that's right in front of us. And I think we're just plunging in. We got a long way to go.
You know, as a former network correspondent who was a parachute artist, I can't impress upon what we do. The first thing, you get out of the plane, you either find a local radio station and see who's listening and who's the reporter there, and then buy the localist newspaper you can find, right? And a lot of times, it became harder and harder to find that very small paper. So how many fellows do you have, and how many different?
We have 13.
They're not in newsrooms. These guys are the Report for America guys.
So we have 25 Ground Truth fellows a year who do global and national reporting. Those are in-depth projects, but short-term. But we have 13 Report for America core members right now. Out in the newsrooms. And the exciting news is, with support from the Knight Foundation, we'll grow that to 60 Report for America core members this year. So In June, Steve and the Report for America team will be really training them up
Yeah.
and then deploying them into the newsrooms.
So how many newsrooms will they be in by the end of this sort of 60?
About 40 or 50 newsrooms
Okay.
around the country, and it's a mix of nonprofit news organizations, public radio stations, newspapers.
Urban, rural.
Yeah. It's a unfortunately the need is everywhere. I mean, there's lots of places where there are gaps, and it's very poignant because you'll have like in Eastern Kentucky, where we have a reporter at the Lexington Herald Leader, they had one reporter covering 14 counties in Eastern Kentucky. So now they have two reporters covering 14 counties.
Yeah,
That's still
right.
a lot of counties, but the impact he was able to have by being there, the best example is like within a couple of weeks of being on the job, he came across this story about how the people in a particular county didn't have clean drinking water. And one thing led to another. He kept following up and going to people's houses, and before long, the person who was in charge of the water districts got forced out, and then a little bit after that, magically, government money materializes to help fix this problem. And what I always found so fascinating about this is this was not a 6-month-long investigative project.
Right.
He was literally on his second week, right? But it was dogged, basic, on the ground, community reporting, and it had a real impact.
It's what we would call accountability reporting, right?
Yeah.
Investigative reporting projects can take a year to do it really right. If you think about the Spotlight team, where I used to work at the Boston Globe, or you think about big investigative heavy lift projects done by ProPublica and others, this is different. This is giving emerging journalists investigative tools so they can cover a region or a beat that isn't being covered and pull these enterprise stories or accountability reporting projects forward. And we keep seeing it. Steve mentioned Appalachia and the Clean Water Project. A woman in Mississippi went into a story looking at criminal justice was her beat. She began to look at one jail where there were one death after another until there were 16 deaths inside this prison in 1 month. And that was 300% over any other month recorded. And why was that? And how it became a layering of looking at the failures of a prison system on many levels, not just one cause. That kind of reporting can only happen when you get really smart, talented, emerging journalists with some investigative tools and the resources to spend at least 1 year, and we hope 2 years for these reporters in the field. First year is mandatory. Second year, we're inviting them to re-up, and we're hoping they will.
And now, as good as 25 and 60 sound, compared to the number of journalists who are not working today, who were 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, how do we even begin addressing the scale of this problem?
Well, our goal is 1,000 reporters in the field in the year 2023. So I agree that to really make a dent in this, it's not going to be dozens of people. It has to be hundreds of people. And in a way, we got overly complicated in trying to think about how are we going to solve the problems of journalism? Are we going to get fancier new storytelling tools? Or there's going to be an app that somehow solves this? Really, we need more reporters, period. We need more reporters in local communities, embedded there for several years, doing this kind of work. And the thing about the Report for America model is that because you're splitting the burden 3 different ways between our program, the local newsroom, and then local funders, it's actually very affordable. And so it's very scalable. It's not a big bureaucracy. We'll often say to local funders that for $10,000 you can make a reporter happen. Well, that's like, when you think about it, $10,000 to field a reporter for a year who's going to do 100 stories on public health in their community. Right. That's like a really, really cost-effective way of sending it. So while in the sense 1,000 seems like a scary number, we've got to head there. We've got to get to real scale if we're going to really try to bring real health to communities.
The other thing is to unlock the local funding that's been on the sidelines. So part of Steve's architecture here has been, we'll come in with national funding from Knight and others. What we're really trying to say to these communities is you need to get to the smaller foundations in your community and pull them off the sidelines. they've thought for years that $10,000 can't do anything to save media in their community. And as Steve just pointed out, actually, it can. So I think one of the great challenges we have in this really unique funding formula is pulling together as many national foundations and individual supporters as we can to come and then really match the regional foundations and get community buy-in. That's, I think, one of the great elements and really unique aspects of the funding model as Steve conceived it and as we're now starting to really execute on.
And which we totally stole from the Knight Foundation.
Yeah,
Right? There was the idea that, you know, I mean, honestly, the place where I met the community foundations
so
and
true.
learned about that was
Yeah.
was at
Right.
the early Knight Foundation conferences on local funders. And Alberto used to have this line, I don't know if he even uses it anymore, but it always stuck in my head, where he'd be talking to local foundations and he would say, journalism should be your second most important issue. It was always like sort of an arresting thing. Like, you always say, not your most important issue? He's like, no. Your most important issue may be health or environment, but you're not going to make any progress. Your community is not going to improve their schools if there's no reporter covering the schools.
Right. The school, well, we've seen that in State House reporting has dwindled to abysmally low rates, and it's incredibly important to know what your state government's doing, right? And so what are, briefly before we wrap up, what are specific areas that you're seeing across the country? Are there topics that are news deserts that we should be paying more attention to?
Well, I think some of them are around criminal justice, health, education is a big one. Water issues we're seeing in many places, Appalachia and beyond. I think there are so many needs that we need to meet. It's hard to say, but what we're really intent on is having the communities themselves and the news organizations in those communities tell us what needs to be covered so we can then come forward.
And there's a sort of a soft benefit too. Like, we've been talking about the very concrete things. Like, no one is covering the schools, so we don't know what the hell is going on in our school and whether it's working. That's like a concrete benefit where you can make the water better. But having these reporters here also helps strengthen trust between the reporters and the community and the news organizations community. And there's no way to do that except having people on the ground, embedded in those communities, being seen at the school board meeting, things like that. And that's a really, it's harder to prove, but it's a really important goal of the program.
All right, Steve Waldman from Report for America and Charlie Sennott from Ground Truth Project. Thank you both.
Thank you.